Welcome to True Crime Case Files, the podcast that delves deep into the most compelling true crime stories. Julie Lewis was 18 years old. She lived in Payette, Idaho, a small town known for its friendly people and beautiful landscapes. Julie was in her senior year of high school and was known for her beauty and intelligence. She dreamed of going to college and starting a new life away from the troubles she faced at home. Julie's life had been tough. Her mother died of cancer when Julie was only 14. This loss left a big hole in her life. Her father, Tony Lewis, was a police officer who worked long hours. Julie often felt lonely and started seeking the company of older men who could offer her the stability and comfort she missed. Some people thought Julie was manipulative, using her looks and charm to get what she wanted. Others believed she was just trying to survive in a world that had not been kind to her. In school, Julie was an honor roll student. Her friends described her as ambitious and determined, always talking about her plans for the future. She wanted to study business at the University of Idaho and one day own her own company. Julie's teachers saw her potential and often praised her hard work and dedication. In the days leading up to her death, Julie was busy preparing for her high school graduation. She had bought a new dress for the occasion and was excited about the graduation ceremony. She talked to her friends about their plans for the summer. They planned to visit the local mall, go to the movies, and spend time at the nearby Snake River. Julie also had a part-time job at a local diner, where she saved up money for college. She was well liked by her coworkers and customers for her friendly and outgoing personality. Despite her troubles, Julie tried to stay positive. She had a close-knit group of friends who supported her. They often hung out at local spots like the Payette skate park and the community swimming pool. Julie was also involved in her school's drama club, where she enjoyed acting and working behind the scenes. Julie's dreams were big, but her life was cut short. She had plans and ambitions, but she never got the chance to see them through. Her death shocked the small town of Payette, leaving everyone wondering what could have been. On the morning of June 5, 2012, Tony Lewis came home after his night shift as a police officer. Tony expected to find his daughter Julie still asleep. Instead, he found a horrifying scene. Julie's lifeless body was on the floor of her bedroom. The room was in disarray, with items scattered everywhere. Julie had been brutally attacked. She was bludgeoned with a rock from outside their home, and then strangled with a belt. Tony was shocked and devastated. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Fighting through his grief and panic, Tony called 911 to report the crime. His voice trembled as he told the dispatcher what had happened. Despite his training and experience as a police officer, nothing could have prepared him for this. The news of Julie's murder spread quickly through the small town of Payette. Payette hadn't seen a murder in over 20 years, and the community was in shock. Julie was well known and liked by many. Her death was a terrible blow to the town. When the first responders arrived, they found Tommy outside, distraught and in tears. The sight inside Julie's room was gruesome. Blood was spattered on the walls, and the signs of a struggle were clear. Julie's face was bruised, and there were ulcers around her neck from the belt used to strangle her. The rock used in the attack lay nearby, covered in blood. The paramedics pronounced Julie dead at the scene. Tony could only watch in despair as they did their job. He was overwhelmed with grief, unable to comprehend how someone could do this to his daughter. Neighbors started to gather outside the Lewis home, drawn by the flashing lights of the police cars and ambulances. They whispered among themselves, trying to understand what had happened. Reporters from local news outlets soon arrived, their cameras and microphones capturing the tragic scene. They interviewed some of the neighbors, who spoke of their shock and sadness. Julie's friends and classmates were devastated by the news. Many of them had seen her just the day before at school, laughing and talking about their future plans. Now those plans would never come true. The school counselors were brought in to help the students cope with their grief. The entire town mourned the loss of a bright, young life taken too soon. The police arrived quickly at the Lewis home on the morning of June 5, 2012. Leading the investigation was Detective Kelly "Breezy" Roberts, a seasoned investigator known for her thoroughness and dedication. She had solved many tough cases in her career and was determined to find justice for Julie. The crime scene was horrific. Julie's bedroom was in chaos, with items strewn everywhere. Blood spattered the walls, and signs of a violent struggle were evident. Julie's body lay on the floor, her face bruised and neck marked from the belt used to strangle her. The rock used to bludgeon her lay nearby, covered in blood. Detective Roberts and her team began their meticulous work. Detective Roberts, along with Officer Olson Benson, a local officer with 15 years on the force, started by securing the area to prevent contamination of evidence. They took photos of the entire scene, capturing every detail. They used luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and collected fingerprints from various surfaces. The investigators also bagged the rock and belt as key pieces of evidence. Detective Roberts noticed several things right away. The window in Julie's room was slightly open, suggesting someone might have entered or exited through it. There were scratches on the windowsill, possibly from the killer climbing in or out. Outside, footprints in the garden soil indicated someone had recently been there. The team interviewed Tony Lewis, who was still in shock. He recounted finding Julie and calling 911. His grief was palpable, and Detective Roberts felt his pain as a father. Despite his emotional state, Tony provided all the information he could, hoping it would help catch his daughter's killer. The local news outlets, including the Payette Times, covered the story extensively. Reporters interviewed residents and followed every development closely. The town was gripped by fear and sadness, unable to believe such a brutal crime could happen in their peaceful community. As the investigation continued, Detective Roberts and her team worked tirelessly. They analyzed the evidence collected, hoping to find clues that would lead them to the murderer. They checked for any connections Julie might have had with known criminals and looked into her recent activities. The community's support for the police was strong. People brought food and coffee to the officers working long hours. Local businesses put up posters offering rewards for information leading to the arrest of Julie's killer. The town of Payette, once quiet and serene, now united in their quest for justice. The first suspect the police investigated was Harold Henderson. Harold, aged 70, was a retired used car salesman who lived in Payette. He was well known in the town for his flashy personality and competitive nature. Despite his age, Harold had a reputation for being charming and wealthy, making him popular in the local social scene. He was a widower, living alone in a large house filled with memorabilia from his younger days. Harold's connection to Julie Lewis came to light quickly. It was discovered that he had been romantically involved with Julie. Some residents of Payette knew about their relationship and whispered about the odd pairing. Harold's interest in Julie raised eyebrows, but in a small town, people often keep secrets. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts and Officer Olson Benson brought Harold in for questioning on June 6, 2012. They wanted to understand the nature of his relationship with Julie and determine if he had a motive for her murder. Harold arrived at the police station dressed neatly, his demeanor calm but slightly defensive. During the interrogation, Harold admitted to his relationship with Julie but denied any involvement in her death. He claimed they had a consensual sexual relationship, started only after she turned 18, and that he cared deeply for her. However, Harold's competitive streak, especially with his twin brother Alan, suggested a possible motive. Harold and Alan had a long history of rivalry, and both had been vying for Julie's attention. Harold's calm and confident demeanor began to waver as Detective Roberts pressed him on his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Harold stated he was at home, watching a rerun of NCIS on CBS. He insisted he had no reason to harm Julie and was shocked by her death. However, his answers were vague, and he couldn't provide a solid alibi. The police also investigated Harold's financial records. They found that he had been giving Julie money regularly, which could have been a source of tension if he discovered she was manipulating him. Harold's phone record showed multiple calls and messages to Julie in the days leading up to her death, indicating frequent communication. Despite his denials, the police felt Harold had the motive and opportunity to commit the crime. His history of competitiveness with Alan and his romantic involvement with Julie painted a troubling picture. The investigators kept a close eye on Harold, looking for any inconsistencies in his story and waiting for any evidence that might link him directly to the murder. As the investigation continued, Harold remained a prime suspect. His flamboyant personality and competitive nature, coupled with his involvement with Julie, made him a central figure in the case. The town of Payette watched closely as the police worked to uncover the truth behind Julie's tragic death. The second suspect in the investigation was Alan Henderson, Harold's twin brother. Alan, also 70 years old, was a retired high school history teacher. Known for his intellect and passion for teaching, Alan was respected and well-liked in Payette. He had a reputation for being level-headed and scholarly, a stark contrast to his more flamboyant brother. Alan had never married and was often seen as a bachelor who enjoyed his solitude. He spent much of his time reading and participating in community events. Despite his age, Alan had a magnetic personality that attracted people of all ages. He was particularly fond of attending local book clubs and giving lectures at the town library. The police discovered that Alan, like his brother, had also been romantically involved with Julie Lewis. This revelation shocked many in the town, as Alan was viewed as a more reserved and dignified figure. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts and Officer Olson Benson brought Alan in for questioning on June 7, 2012, to understand his relationship with Julie and his potential motives. Alan arrived at the police station looking composed, dressed in a tweed jacket that hinted at his scholarly background. During the interrogation, he admitted to his relationship with Julie, but insisted it was platonic. He explained that he enjoyed her company and found her bright and ambitious. Alan's affection for Julie was evident, but he denied any romantic involvement. Detective Roberts pressed Alan about his whereabouts on the night of Julie's murder. Alan stated he was at home, working on a lecture for the local historical society. He mentioned reading a book about the Civil War, a topic he was passionate about. However, his alibi was weak, as he lived alone and had no witnesses to confirm his story. Alan's demeanor during the interrogation was calm but saddened. He expressed disbelief that Julie could be dead. He cooperated fully with the police, providing them with his phone records and access to his home. The investigators found nothing suspicious at his residence, but they continued to scrutinize his interactions with Julie. The police also interviewed people who knew Alan. His colleagues and former students spoke highly of him, describing him as a dedicated teacher who cared deeply about education. Despite his calm exterior, the possibility of betrayal by Julie could have triggered a strong emotional response. As the investigation progressed, Alan remained a key suspect. His scholarly nature and apparent innocence contrasted sharply with the dark motives uncovered. The police continued to explore every lead, determined to uncover the truth behind Julie's murder and the Henderson brothers' involvement. The third suspect in Julie Lewis' murder investigation was her father, Tony Lewis. Tony, 45, was a police officer in Payette, Idaho. Known for his protective nature, Tony was a well-liked figure in the community. He had become close to the Henderson brothers over the years, often acting as a mediator between the two. Tony's connection to Julie was evident, as he was her father and lived next door to Alan Henderson. The police had to consider every possibility, even the uncomfortable one that Tony might be involved. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts and Officer Olson Benson decided to question Tony on June 8, 2012. Tony was still reeling from the shock of finding his daughter's body. When he arrived at the police station, he looked tired and grief-stricken. During the interrogation, Tony recounted his actions on the night of the murder. He had been working a night shift, which he often did to provide for Julie after the death of her mother. Tony insisted he had no reason to harm his daughter and was devastated by her death. Detective Roberts asked Tony about his relationship with the Henderson brothers. Tony admitted he knew about their interest in Julie and had tried to keep the peace between them. He expressed his frustration over their rivalry, which had caused tension in the neighborhood. Despite this, Tony was adamant that he had no involvement in the crime. The police looked into Tony's background and found no history of violence or misconduct. His colleagues at the police department spoke highly of him, describing him as a dedicated officer and loving father. However, the investigators had to consider the possibility that Tony's protective instincts might have driven him to a breaking point. Tony provided his phone records and cooperated fully with the investigation. The record showed he had been on duty at the time of the murder, but the police needed to verify this alibi thoroughly. They checked surveillance footage from the police station and confirmed Tony's presence there during the critical hours. The police also interviewed neighbors and friends of Tony. Most described him as a caring father who was deeply affected by his wife's death and determined to give Julie a better life. Some, however, mentioned that Tony had become more stressed and irritable in recent months, possibly due to the pressure of raising a teenager alone. Despite Tony's grief and cooperation, the police had to keep all possibilities open. His close proximity to the crime scene and his protective nature were significant factors in the investigation. Detective Roberts and her team continued to examine every piece of evidence, knowing that solving the case required looking at every angle, no matter how painful. As the investigation unfolded, Tony remained under scrutiny. The small town of Payette watched closely, hoping for answers and justice for Julie. The police were determined to find the truth, and Tony's involvement, if any, would be uncovered through their relentless efforts. On June 10, 2012, around 3:00 p.m., new evidence came to light. The weather was warm and sunny, typical for Payette in early summer. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts received a call from a local hiker who had found something unusual near the Snake River. He had been walking his dog when he noticed a small bag hidden under some rocks. Detective Roberts and Officer Olson Benson rushed to the scene. They found a small black bag containing a blood-stained shirt and a pair of gloves. The items were immediately taken into evidence. The police believed these items could be crucial in solving Julie's murder. Back at the station, the forensic team examined the evidence. The blood on the shirt matched Julie's. This was a significant breakthrough. The gloves were tested for fingerprints, and the results came back with a match to Harold Henderson. This finding shifted the focus back to Harold, who had previously denied being near the crime scene. Detective Roberts and her team re-examined Harold's alibi. They discovered inconsistencies in his story. Further analysis of his phone records showed he had been near Julie's house at the time of the murder, contradicting his claim of being at home watching TV. The new evidence prompted the police to search Harold's home again. This time, they found a hidden compartment in his garage with several items that raised suspicion, including a second pair of gloves and a belt similar to the one used to strangle Julie. These discoveries painted a clearer picture of Harold's involvement. As the investigation deepened, the police interviewed more witnesses. They found out that Harold had been seen arguing with Julie the day before her death. A neighbor, Mrs. Carter, reported hearing raised voices and seeing Harold leave Julie's house looking angry. With the new evidence, Detective Roberts felt confident they were closing in on the truth. The police brought Harold in for another round of questioning. This time, his demeanor was less confident. Confronted with the evidence, Harold became defensive and struggled to maintain his earlier calmness. The forensic team continued to analyze the evidence, looking for any additional clues. They used advanced techniques like DNA testing and fiber analysis to ensure nothing was overlooked. The detailed investigation paid off, as more links between Harold and the crime were uncovered. By the end of the week, the police were confident they had enough evidence to make an arrest. The discovery of the bag near the Snake River had been the breakthrough they needed. The town of Payette waited anxiously for justice to be served. Hey, true crime case solvers interested in more real-life murder mysteries, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Stay safe, true crime case solvers. On June 12, 2012, the police were ready to make an arrest. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts had pieced together the evidence pointing to Harold Henderson as the murderer. Harold, 70, was a retired used car salesman known for his flamboyant personality and competitive nature. His charm and wealth made him a popular figure in Payette, but his rivalry with his twin brother Alan and romantic involvement with Julie Lewis revealed a darker side. Harold had been competing with Alan for Julie's affection. He had given Julie money regularly and felt betrayed when he discovered her plan to blackmail him and Alan. On the night of June 4, Harold confronted Julie at her home. The argument turned violent, leading Harold to bludgeon her with a rock he found outside and strangle her with a belt. Driven by anger and betrayal, Harold committed the brutal murder. Detective Roberts had discovered inconsistencies in Harold's alibi and found crucial evidence, like the blood-stained shirt and gloves, linking him to the crime. The DNA and fingerprints on the gloves match Harold's, and the blood on the shirt was Julie's. Surveillance footage also placed Harold near Julie's house at the time of the murder. On the morning of June 12, Detective Roberts and Officer Olson Benson went to Harold's house to arrest him. They arrived at 9:00 a.m., and Harold was at home. When they told him he was under arrest for Julie's murder, Harold looked shocked but didn't resist. He was handcuffed and taken to the police station. At the station, Harold was formally charged with murder. His reaction was one of disbelief and anger. He insisted he was innocent, claiming the evidence was planted. Despite his protests, the overwhelming evidence convinced the police of his guilt. Julie's father, Tony Lewis, was informed about the arrest. He was devastated but relieved that the police had found the person responsible for his daughter's death. The town of Payette, which had been closely following the investigation, felt a mix of shock and relief. They couldn't believe someone they knew so well could commit such a heinous crime. As Harold was taken into custody, the town hoped for justice for Julie. Her friends and family gathered to support each other, remembering Julie for her beauty, intelligence, and dreams of a better future. The arrest brought some closure, but the pain of losing Julie would remain with them forever. The evidence against Harold was strong, and the police were confident they had the right person. The case now moved to the courts, where Harold would face trial for his actions. The community waited anxiously for the trial, hoping for a verdict that would bring justice for Julie. Harold Henderson's trial began on July 15, 2012, in Payette County Court. The courtroom was filled with Julie Lewis' family and local residents eager to see justice served. The case received extensive coverage from local news outlets, including the Payette Times and KTVB Channel 7, which kept the community updated on the trial's progress. The prosecutor, Emily Hackle Matchwork, 38, was known for her strong courtroom presence and dedication to seeking justice. Hackle Matchwork argued that Harold Henderson was guilty of brutally murdering Julie Lewis. She presented a clear case, showing evidence such as the blood-stained shirt and gloves found near the Snake River, Harold's fingerprints on the murder weapon, and surveillance footage placing him at Julie's house on the night of the crime. Hackle Matchwork described the crime as an act of rage and betrayal, emphasizing how Harold's rivalry with his twin brother and his manipulative behavior towards Julie led to her tragic death. The defense attorney, Drew Mills, 45, was a respected lawyer with a reputation for defending high-profile cases. Mills argued that the evidence against Harold was circumstantial and that his client was being falsely accused. He suggested that Harold's emotional state and previous arguments with Julie did not prove guilt. Mills attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's evidence, arguing that it was possible someone else could have committed the murder. Julie's family attended the trial every day. Her father, Tony Lewis, appeared exhausted but resolute. He was seen comforting Julie's friends and family, who were deeply affected by the trial. The emotional weight of the case was evident as testimonies about Julie's life and dreams were presented in court. After several weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated and reached a verdict on August 5, 2012. Harold Henderson was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow from the courtroom. Julie's family, while devastated by her loss, felt a sense of justice had been achieved. Sentencing took place on August 12, 2012. Harold was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, Honorable David Thompson, stated that the crime was particularly heinous due to its brutality and the betrayal involved. The sentence was seen by many as a fitting punishment for the crime. The trial's conclusion had a profound impact on the community. Payette, a town that had not seen such a violent crime in years, was left to heal. Julie's friends and family continued to honor her memory, focusing on her dreams and aspirations rather than the tragic end of her life. The case served as a stark reminder of the impact of violence and the importance of justice in a close-knit community. After Harold Henderson's trial and sentencing, life in Payette, Idaho, began to slowly return to normal. The town had been deeply affected by Julie Lewis' murder and the dramatic court case that followed. Payette, known for its close-knit community and small-town charm, was shaken by the violence and the betrayal that came to light. Julie's father, Tony Lewis, continued to cope with the loss of his daughter. He took a leave of absence from his job as a police officer to focus on his grief and to support Julie's memory. Tony began speaking at local schools about the importance of communication and the dangers of manipulation, hoping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. His efforts were met with support from the community, who admired his strength and resilience. Harold Henderson's life took a dramatic turn after his conviction. He was transferred to the Idaho State Penitentiary, where he began serving his life sentence. Harold's high-profile case and the nature of his crime made him a notable inmate, but he kept a low profile in prison. His flamboyant personality and competitive nature were replaced by a more subdued and reflective demeanor. The prison system provided Harold with counseling, but it did little to ease the weight of his actions. Alan Henderson, Harold's twin brother, also had to deal with the aftermath. Though he was cleared of any involvement in Julie's murder, the case had taken a toll on him emotionally. Alan withdrew from the social scene and focused on personal reflection. He continued to live in Payette, where he was known for his quiet and reserved nature. The community remained supportive of Alan, understanding that he had been a victim of his brother's actions as much as Julie's family had been. As time passed, Payette slowly moved forward. The town's recovery was marked by a sense of healing and unity, with residents coming together to support one another. The memory of Julie Lewis lived on through the scholarship and charity events, reminding everyone of her life and the impact of her tragic death.